RPGs have the best boss fights, and I don't think that's an unpopular opinion. And while just about every genre has a boss, RPGs in particular are more reliant on them to keep players engaged. The difficulty spike an RPG boss introduces is essential to the genre, because if the villain that burned down your village and killed your whole family had the same HP bar as the level 1 squirrel, beating them wouldn't be all that satisfying. But even with more HP and new mechanics, RPGs are still games where the bigger number usually wins. Is the boss too hard? Have you tried leveling up? Didn't work? Well, try leveling up some more. The ability to grind means the difficulty in most role-playing games is relative, and two players with different levels of preparation will have a different experience thanks to how many experience points they have gathered. But what happens when you hit that level cap, and just grinding is no longer a path to victory? Past the final boss, and after the credits roll, there is still one more challenge to complete: the super boss. These secret bosses or super bosses are often my favorite fights to go up against. Due to their optional nature, the developers don't have to hold back and can really test die-hard fans who've mastered the game's combat system. And while ranking these super bosses on their difficulty level isn't a unique concept, I have a bone to pick with some of these videos. They are bad. These are pointless videos. Half of them include turn-based games mixed in with action RPGs, which don't make a lick of sense. And the other half include MMORPGs, which are not at all comparable to a single-player experience. And look, I get it. Most of these videos and articles come from content farms. They have 20 articles to write a week. They don't have time to actually play the games they're writing about, so of course they're going to steal ideas from Reddit. But you deserve better content! So I made my own list. But what exactly makes a boss fight difficult? How would one go about categorizing encounters from different games with different gameplay styles? Of course, I can't be purely objective here, but we can at least create some guidelines to get us to a logical conclusion. The way I see it, there are three categories when judging fight difficulty: RNG, game knowledge, and mental tax. RNG, pretty self-explanatory. If a boss fight is the exact same every time you do it, it should in theory be easier than a fight where there are more random elements at play. This could be critical hits, status effects, or having an AI script with higher variability. Game knowledge is how much information is needed to win. Is the most effective strategy something you could stumble upon all on your own, or does it involve some obscure technique the game's tutorials don't cover? And mental tax. How much crap do you have to mentally keep track of when doing these boss fights? Like keeping track of what phase you're on, boss HP total, and form changes, that kind of thing. In the gaming industry, they call this game weight, but I don't want you to get the wrong idea. I'm not, calling the bosses fat, okay? And to make things fair, each super boss will be judged on the highest difficulty available with maximum preparation. And we won't be abusing any glitches or cheese strats that exploit the game's mechanics in unintended ways. We can only win with honest strategies. So with that in mind, here are the hardest bosses in RPG history. Fear and Hunger, Traces of Golgoroth. Hunger is one of those rare games talked about online where people aren't exaggerating about its difficulty. It's hard, but after a few attempts you eventually learn the lay of the land and track down some party members and assemble a drunken posse. It is then that the tides start to shift in your favor. One of the main mechanics of Fear and Hunger is targeting limbs to destroy them. But the enemy can also do this to you. So the more limbs you have, the better odds you have of surviving the dungeon. Yes, it's true. The secret to beating Fear and Hunger was the power of friendship all along. I can't believe it either. Kahara, Darcy, Enki, Blood Golem, they're like a second family to me. Yeah, you can't recruit them in hard mode. There is no saving, enemies hit harder and have more health. You also can't see 2 feet in front of you without a torch. If you even attempt to fight this game's super boss on hard mode, you're either stupid or crazy or both, which is me. Hi, playing my absolute best, it takes roughly 2 to 3 hours to even get to the Traces of Golgoroth. And by then, I'm likely beaten down and my character's anus is bleeding. But during one of my better runs, I managed to get close to the end, with both arms attached and some pretty good gear. Now, you don't level up in the traditional sense in this game, so getting strong items or spells is your only real means of character progression, so I was feeling pretty good. But thanks to a glitch, the boss went before I could and ripped both my arms clean off. And then I died. The fear that this could happen on any of your attempts, due to no fault of your own, psychs you out. So there's this psychological angle to this super boss that really none of the others have. And on top of this, If you don't have a purifying charm to dispel whispers of Gorgoroth's spell, you just die in 5 turns regardless, so good luck. So how do you win if it's so one-sided? Well, the optimal strategy is to learn Necromancy, create 2 fresh skeletons, then summon the Blood Golem to get a full party despite hard mode's limitations. You then chuck a poison dart at Gorgoroth's stomach and spam guard till the remnants of the old god unceremoniously perish in the lamest way imaginable. But if we classify the toxic status as some sort of cheese, which by most definitions it assuredly is, and instead take on the traces in a fair fight, we are in for a very different kind of boss battle. We're still going to sit behind our minions and let them do all the work, but they're kind of incompetent and they attack targets at random. Traces of Gorgoroth has 8 appendages that they can target, so the stars have to align for them to focus their damage, and they're not going to do that, so you have to contribute while simultaneously defending yourself, because if you die, the fight's over. But are we judging the boss battle in isolation? Or do we consider external factors like the encounters before it? Remove the dungeon itself from the equation, the fight isn't terribly complex. It's the hard mode restrictions in conjunction with the fight that make it such a pain. If you have the game knowledge to protect your arms, which you probably have been doing the entire time, and enter with a stocked inventory of consumables, the fight, in theory, is manageable. Hypothetically, if you could save right before fighting him and retry until you succeed, it would only be a matter of time until you got lucky. From my point of view, it's the most stressful gaming challenge I've ever completed. But was it Gorgoroth or hard mode? A tricky boss, without a doubt, but being an RPG Maker game, the combat system is not very complex. And if I handed you a save file where you spawn right in front of the guy, it might only take you a handful of attempts to win. So think of Gorgoroth as maybe an honorary mention, if anything, but something to set the tone for the entries to come. But let's leave all the death and phallic imagery behind and move from one indie RPG to another. I get that dick out of my face! You know what Deltarune is. I refuse to believe you don't. So I ain't explaining crap. Love this game, love the characters, and I especially love all the incredibly creative boss encounters Toby Fox and his team have made over the years. In Deltarune, you dodge incoming attacks by moving your soul around this little box. The stronger the opponent, the crazier the attack pattern. But there's one fight that pushes the system to its breaking point. Scattered around the game world of Deltarune, there are 3 broken key fragments to be found. And after forging them into the door key, you may unlock the prison cell in the castle basement and challenge Deltarune's secret boss, the court jester, Devil. And Devil was the hardest fight, but the Roaring Knight stole his spotlight in Chapter 3. Out of nowhere, this freak concludes the chapter with a seemingly unbeatable boss fight. 3 phases of increasingly complicated attacks, the nastiest the series has seen to date. The only hope for survival is a hidden item called the Shadow Mantle, which reduces the knight's damage, but even then only one character can wear it, leaving the rest of your party vulnerable. The knight has 5 main moves: Crystal Barrage, Knife Dance, Board Rend, Sword Tunnel, and Sanguine Slash. Survive these and they reappear enhanced in a different order to throw your rhythm off. Depending on the Roaring Knight's HP percentage, you either see new patterns again or enter phase 4, then try to survive its final roar. So how do you win? Well, just don't get hit. Duh. But for the rest of us mortals who can't do a no-hit run, you will eventually take some damage, and an aspect of this battle that goes underappreciated is how it's a balancing act between damage dealing and rationing your supplies, while also gaining TP to use Rude Buster. Use your limited healing items on the wrong targets or at an inopportune time. Well, now you can't guard enhanced sword tunnels or board rends, and you might just die. Yet again, you cannot gain levels in Deltarune, and that puts it above the majority of the competition because the difficulty is fixed. But aren't we forgetting someone? What about Sans? Isn't the Sans fight harder? Well, I don't think so, but they are close. Sans has less thinking and is a longer fight, but Roaring Knight is significantly shorter and has way more to consider. Feel free to disagree, but even with the mantle, certain patterns like the sword tunnel I could never reliably dodge. But Deltarune is still a work in progress, so we have to put a pin in this placement. As you just know, Toby will include a truly diabolical boss as Deltarune's final chapters release. Digital Devil Saga, Demi-Fiend. Yeah, it's not exactly a shock he's on the list. Demi-Fiend has quite the reputation, often being called the hardest boss fight, period. And while I do think it's challenging, I think that reputation is pretty overblown. To see why, we need to take a closer look. It's a 3-on-3 match, with Demi-Fiend summoning 2 other demon allies. The demons themselves don't do much damage, but they support their summoner by getting rid of any debuffs you might land on him. Once you kill a demon ally, he quickly summons another to take its place. You may think it best to leave the demons alone then, but after 30 turns of casting damage spells, they will sacrifice themselves, healing the boss back to full HP. So the demons gotta go. The Fiend himself does heavy physical attacks to your entire party, which can inflict you with status effects, and if they crit, which they often do, he gains more turns, so there's plenty of RNG involved. Speaking of RNG, after you kill 2 of his demon allies, the 3rd demon will cast a sleep spell, followed by Demi-Fiend using his signature attack, Gaia Rage, dealing usually 5 digits of damage in a game where your HP is capped at 999. The only reliable way to dodge this is to have the oddly named skill Null Sleep equipped. You will dodge all incoming attacks so long as you remain asleep. Based on my testings, with the worst odds possible, as all my characters have 99 luck, the chance of none of your characters being hit by the sleep spell is roughly 15%. Which sure, that's bad. Nobody wants to lose just because of 15% chance, but you only have to see this skill 2 times to win the fight. And those are all the mechanics at play. There is no time limit. There's no DPS checks. No multiple phases. Just dodge Gaia Rage twice, and you win. I promise. I'm not being contrarian when I say this, but when the popular opinion is that this is the hardest super boss ever made, I can't help but ask, is that it? Online discussion tends to not bring up how ridiculously strong and tenacious the cast of Digital Devil Saga are. I'm taking double digits from his demons, okay? And I can heal to 100% every single turn. And then there's broken skills like Recarmdra, which means I can revive my allies almost non-stop. Unless you're unfamiliar with the game's mechanics or just did not grind enough. The only thing you should ever die to in this fight is Demi-Fiend's Gaia Rage and the odd instant death spell. And when looking closer at the boss and doing it myself multiple times, I can see plenty of areas where the developers over at Atlus could have made this way more challenging if they really wanted. But as it stands right now, it's just a slot machine. No strategy, all luck. I don't really have a good transition for this. Persona! These games have become really popular over the years, but what used to be fairly challenging games have had their difficulty ironed out to appeal to as many people as possible. And yet, the duels against the Velvet Attendants retain their status as the ultimate tests of the player's Persona fusing abilities. These battles are infamous for giving players a hard time, but not in the usual way, as before the battle begins you must adhere to a specific rule set, or they rage quit the battle before it even begins. Do my wacky fun boss fight. No, not like that, Meggy Dolan! You can't reflect whatever the opponent is about to do, or you die. Oh, also you can't take too long to win, or you die. Wait, are you playing on a Wednesday afternoon? Yep, that's against the rules. Bye-bye. The Persona system allows for so much customization in how you handle encounters. The only way you could have a super boss is if you have these dumb rules. So the battles tend to play out with a fixed pattern, like a dance. Mess up a step and you're forced to start over from the very beginning. Elizabeth, from the original Persona 3, is brought up the most often when discussing the hardest version of this challenge. And I'm not gonna lie, she is tough. So I was a bit disappointed when the remake, Persona 3 Reload, was released, and they also reimagined the Elizabeth boss battle. But sadly, they forgot to boost her HP total to compensate for the increased damage output of the remake, leading to a pretty lackluster rematch.
What a blunder.
So to make up for this, when it came time for the DLC, episode Aegis, Atlus did something I didn't expect, and made the hardest Persona fight to date. Persona 3 Reload, Joker. Joker on the Heartless difficulty doesn't just have inflated stats, but gains new moves in a deadlier AI script. And his list of rules is the most strict. 20 turns to win, you can't crit him, don't debuff him all the way, and also don't do too much damage too quickly, or else he'll kill you. It's also impossible to beat him solo, so you must bring teammates. But this introduces a new problem. While you can change your persona and protect your elemental weakness, your allies aren't as lucky, and Joker can and will exploit this fact to gain multiple turns and snowball the fight out of your control. The most consistent strategy, if you can believe it, only has a 25% success rate before you even press a button. I'm not joking. To do enough damage as fast as possible, you need your 5th non-combat character to use 2 buffing moves back to back. The only problem is this is completely reliant on RNG, and she either goes for one or the other, but you need 2 charges, or it's a reset. It's also the first boss on this list with a heavy emphasis on improvisation. I've done this battle many times, and it tends to play out slightly differently each attempt. Either a character gets focused or hit with a status at an odd time, and the ideal strategy falls apart. This could have been a top 10 video had I just included similar fights from the other Persona games, but then the list would be a little redundant. So in case you're curious, here's how I rank each boss, with Joker being an easy pick for number 1, and borders on being almost unfair and unfun due to the RNG and precise timing it requires. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, ooh, did you do too much damage? Oh, he's under half HP? He doesn't have any debuffs. Well, he's going to heal himself 100%, and you can't win because of the time limit. It's a lot of that, but if you can get the double charge and avoid the status effects, most of this fight is just hanging out for the right moment to strike. That and the majority of the strategy is reactive instead of proactive, equates to a lot of turns being low in critical thought. So with a little luck on your side, you can use your 7 Theurgies and end it off with 1 Armageddon, and Joker will eventually go down. Final Fantasy XII, Arcadian Judges. Final Fantasy has been doing the whole secret boss thing since 1987, so the series is filled with plenty of them. But the most challenging by far is the deathmatch versus all the Arcadian judges at the same time in Final Fantasy XII The Zodiac Age. During the main story of Final Fantasy XII, you encounter some of these judges throughout your journey and battle them individually. And they're really no big deal, but in 12's optional trial mode, the player fights wave after wave of enemies and bosses, culminating in stage 100, with a battle against all the judges at once. And to say it's a chaotic mess is an understatement. Most bosses in Final Fantasy XII are a 3-on-1 endeavor, but for once, the player is outnumbered. Becoming confused is a given, as the human limit of what can be tracked is tested, as each judge in turn does something different at the start of the battle. Drace buffs her allies, increasing their speed and decreasing the damage they take. Geese throws status effects on everyone and takes away your buffs, whilst the remaining judges, Bergen, Gabranth, and Zargaboth, keep you busy with their overwhelming physical attacks. Normally this battle is effectively unbeatable, as the enemy simply has more actions than you. No matter how hard you try to win honestly, the judges will outlast you due to their numbers advantage. So we're going to cheat and look up a guide. Now technically you could learn this strategy on your first attempt, in the same way you could technically walk outside and dodge the rain. But to stand even the smallest chance of victory, one of your characters needs to be able to inflict status effects to the enemy. That's right, the only bosses in the entire Final Fantasy franchise not immune to status effects. Talk about a curveball. The most common method of throwing out these statuses is the Niha Paleo accessory, which reverses the status effects of curative items. So a potion would now deal damage instead of healing it. So with this item equipped, we spam the item Remedy, which normally removes all statuses, but now applies every status all at once. But the Niha Paleo is not a silver bullet, as only 4 of the judges are susceptible to status effects, and then only a select few will actually land. The most common strategy is to throw out 1 Remedy at Geese to slow and poison him. Then we throw another at Drace so she becomes immobile. Then we kite the fight away from her so she can't cast her spells due to a lack of range. And finally, we put Zarbath asleep, so you only have to worry about 2 judges instead of 5. But the tricky thing is doing this all in the span of 15 seconds before the battle begins and everything spirals out of control. That is the real boss fight here. You have to remember which judge is weak to which status, who is pacified, and make sure your AI-controlled allies don't wake up a judge prematurely. And to make matters worse, they all roughly look the same, so you better memorize those names. It's a lot to keep track of. But once you whittle down the numbers and kill your first judge, you have a decent shot of snowballing your advantage. In an ideal game state, you apply the status effects, attempt to burst down Geese before he can take away your buffs. With him gone, you move to Drace, and with some lucky multi-hits and summons, you're down to a 3-on-3. Spam Zargaboth with Prince's Kisses to put him to sleep, so we can't use an elixir on Gabranth. and slowly whittle down the remaining 2 now that you have the breathing room to apply buffs and debuffs. If you can make it to this stage, you can reliably pull out a win. If you can, that is. For as many hours as I have in Final Fantasy XII, Trial 100 is always a challenge. Even with the best strategy in mind, executing it always tests my skill and multitasking abilities. Anyone who's completed this fight knows how brutal it is, and is far above anything else in the Final Fantasy series. But once you have the tools to win, and the kill order, the fight does more or less play out the same way each time. Outside of some multi-hits and physical attacks being blocked, it's a high skill, low random chance fight, while the remaining battles on this list are both, which is the only reason it's not higher. Digital Devil Saga 2, Satan. The sequel to Digital Devil Saga brings its own secret boss fight, and unlike the Demi-Fiend, Satan needs luck and skill to be bested. I'll cut right to the chase. Satan isn't just a bit harder than Demi-Fiend. It's in a completely different league. For starters, you can only fight Satan on hard mode, which is accurately named for once. Meanwhile, Digital Devil Saga 1 only has one difficulty option. But the inflated stats aren't the problem here. Satan demands your undivided attention for the entirety of his battle. Similar to the multitasking of the judges, in this fight, you must keep track of 3 distinct elements. The current elemental phase Satan is on, the total boss HP, so bust out that calculator, and the amount of buffs your party currently has. All at the same time. It is just too much crap for one person to handle without tools of some kind. So in order, Satan has 4 distinct elemental phases he switches between at the end of each turn. These phases have different elemental resistances, and if you attack when Satan reflects the element type you're using, you may as well reset, as recovering from that is almost impossible. You also need to input each point of damage you deal into your calculator, because the lower Satan's HP bar goes, the more new moves it learns to ruin your chances of winning. At 50% HP, Satan will cast Temptation, a charm spell with 100% accuracy that needs to be blocked preemptively with a shield. If you go over 50% without this shield, on the turn Satan uses Temptation, the fight is unrecoverable. And lastly, the main mechanic of this fight is that you have 4 turns to maximize your buffs on at least one party member, or else Satan will cast God's Breath and insta-kill your whole team. In most games, this wouldn't be a problem, but Digital Devil Saga does not track this information for you, so the only way to know for sure if you're about to die to God's Breath is if you bust out some pen and paper, or waste a turn buffing in excess to see the tooltip that you've reached the limit. Tracking all this crap, while still trying to do damage, shield, and heal, is the closest thing you will ever find to an MMORPG boss fight in a single-player video game. It's maddening, but you do have one ace up your sleeve. In this game, optional equipment called rings were added to the battle system, and one ring in particular helps out a lot here, the dodge ring. The dodge ring has the incredible effect of ending your opponent's turn if you successfully dodge an attack, which happens pretty often in this fight, allowing your party to get lucky and bounce back from a game state that you would normally lose in. So if you get lucky enough, you can dodge every move Satan has. Well, except one. At 25% HP remaining, Satan gains yet another new spell, Retribution, which kills the player character with the lowest magic stat. This cannot be dodged, it cannot be blocked, and straight up removes one of your teammates from the fight. And after that, you still have 4 spells to survive. The next turn, Satan does it again! This phase acts as a soft enrage mechanic. Satan now has 4 mechanics you have to mitigate each round. You have to maximize your buffs, you have to block Temptation, and you have to revive your ally twice from Retribution. Oh, and I hope you are still keeping track of that HP bar, because if you fail to finish Satan off when he's below 15% HP, he will cast Dia Rahan, healing himself to 100%, effectively ending the fight, as you can't deal with Satan's new spells while chipping away that much HP. Nothing in all my years of gaming was as demoralizing as getting Satan down to 1% HP, only for him to be healed completely, just because I didn't crit on the final turn. Absolutely soul-crushing. So we got insta-kills, we got multiple fail states, we have more multitasking than any RPG I know of. Heck, nothing in any RPG I've ever played comes close to the complexity and mental duress of the Satan boss fight. Okay, there's one other, but Etrian Odyssey 2 Untold, Devil. As we've seen from the rankings so far, the developers over at Atlas, they make some pretty tough bosses. and while challenging, they are designed to be beaten. I want to be perfectly clear before I make this next statement. I am not the problem here. I've played and beaten every boss in every Etrian Odyssey game. They're pretty tough games even for the intended audience, but it's only a matter of time until you figure out the winning strategy. Devil is not like this. The Devil is the single worst designed boss I've ever beaten in a lifetime of playing RPGs. Now, you're typically not going to see the Devil on one of these lists for a few reasons. For one, he's extremely uncool. When you have these over-the-top, insane secret bosses with tons of love poured into them, like Sephiroth, Culex, Morgan Freeman. Devil, well, he's not really that flashy. He's just a fat alien in a chair. Wait, didn't I say I want to fat shame? But essentially, Etrian 2 Untold is a reimagining of the second Etrian Odyssey game for the 3DS. The previous Etrian 2 on DS had a famously difficult fight called the Child, so of course you have to make an even harder fight for the remake. And they delivered in the worst way imaginable. The Devil fight is a DLC battle, which is hilarious to me. Imagine paying for someone to torture you. Oh wait, people do that. So let's just get into it. The Devil has 3 different AI scripts and behaviors depending on your difficulty. You may be able to find a few videos online of people beating this guy. But here's the thing. They either played the game on easy or normal, or beat the boss with some cheese. Nobody, and I mean nobody, bothers fighting this thing the intended way. Instead, most win the battle on turn 5 by using a very specific party composition, ignoring all of Devil's phases and mechanics, and call it a day. Because the intended path to victory is just stupid. To simplify, we're dealing with multiple phases of increasing difficulty with high levels of RNG, instant kills, a glitch if you increase your max HP, which you need to do because the boss has attacks that do static damage. Probably should have tested that a little more. A DPS check, followed by a survival check where you cannot do too much damage or you fail, followed by another DPS check. It is not fun. In short, it's a dance with instant kills and extremely tight execution. The primary mechanic revolves around the manipulation of your force gauge. At specific moments in the battle, you will use this gauge to circumvent Devil's attacks or eliminate some of his obstacles, like his big ol' eyeballs. The problem is, Devil's either stealing your force gauge or killing you so you can't build more. Some classes are just strictly not viable in this battle, and you only find this out after progressing so far into the fight, only to discover that you're class gated as specific party compositions are required to make a dent in its massive HP pool. Even with its massive AI script on my second monitor and playing my absolute best, I had roughly a 12% chance of victory, largely due to factors outside of my control, like just being flat out unlucky. I genuinely think this was place tested by only one guy who had one party comp in mind, and they beat it one time, and they're like, okay, good enough, I'm gonna ship it. Either that, or they just did not care about balancing hard mode, because the 3DS eShop would be closing down soon, and their priority was on selling more morally dubious DLC quests. Satan and Devil are similar in complexity, but there is no silver lining here like the dodge ring. On hard mode, the Devil genuinely feels like it was from a fan game, and I mean that in the worst way possible. It's not a boss that was designed to be beaten. It was a boss that steals $2 from you and makes you mad. And that technically makes it the hardest fight in RPG history. So now you know, the hardest RPG boss in history. Some weird guy in a chair. Which, as it turns out, is also me. Hi, this might be your first video. I'm JohneAwesome, and I'm making some niche RPG content here on YouTube. If you want to support these high-quality endeavors, consider subscribing to the channel or checking out our Patreon, where you can give me money every month to make videos for you. And if you don't want to do that bullcrap, check out the Discord down below, where you can join and talk to me directly and give me suggestions on future videos. Thanks a whole bunch. Just wanted to make something a little smaller in scope and to tide you over until my biggest project ever is complete. So thanks for watching. See you next time. More videos coming soon. Bye.